Hello everyone, bringing you a video today which forms another in the sporadic series I've been making called Recommended Reading. This looks at various books and things I've found interesting in terms of military history, collecting, reenacting, found them interesting and informative, so obviously bringing you videos to tell you about them, and they may well be of interest to you as well. What we're looking at today is The British Army Today and Tomorrow. This is a book originally produced in 1979. It's quite interesting in that it both provides a snapshot of the British Army at the time and also an appraisal of what the future of the British Army was seen to be at the time. So it's quite interesting from that point of view. There are quite a few decent photographs in it. The text is informative, so it may well prove of interest to you as well. What we're going to have a look at in this video is primarily the photographs, of course. The text, as I say, is nevertheless informative, and these books can be found very cheaply and very easily, so worth picking up a copy. As I say, they're not hard to find. So we'll have a look at this in some detail now. So here it is, The British Army Today and Tomorrow by Colonel H.C.B. Rogers, OBE. And this was first published in 1979. The example I have here is from 1980. And it not only provides for something of a snapshot of the British Army at the time, it's also interesting in that it gives an idea of what thoughts regarding the future of the British Army were at the time. So the book starts with quite a detailed historical background section. We'll have a look at the contents here. You have a section here dealing with the historical background, which deals with the various different branches of the army. And then you look at weapons and equipment, organisation, and then there's a section at the end dealing with the enemy. So the historical background section starts at the front here with the various different branches covered in some detail. And this contains photographs which are quite interesting, but don't directly relate to the period we're looking at, in that they're of the Boer War and Great War era, generally speaking. You see those here. Interesting in and of their own right, but not the primary focus of the book. The various sections covered here in quite some detail, and you can see here more of the historic photographs. As I say, and this section is interesting in and of its own right, but not the primary focus of the book. We have further sections dealing with supply and transport, stores and repair. And then we get into weapons and equipment, which is where we start talking more about the British Army in the late 1970s, moving into the early 1980s. And you have small arms, recoilless guns, recoilless rifles. We start seeing more of the contemporaneous photos of the British Army on exercise. Quite a lot of these photographs are focused on troops exercising in the British Army of the Rhine, but there are some photographs from elsewhere as well. You can see those here. And the text is very informative and provides quite a lot of information and detail. See the photographs there, obviously exercising in NBC suits and so forth. Obviously focusing on the small arms here, but the photographs contain a wealth of other details as well. Details of the individual weapon, which was being trialled at the time. And this, of course, would lead, not directly, but it would lead to the adoption of the L85 in the later 1980s. Further photographs here. So moving on to talk about recoilless rifles here. And obviously air mobility for same. And then we move into a section dealing with artillery here, which not only deals with guns, but also deals with missiles as well. Flick a little bit further through here, we can see various missile systems being discussed. Detailed photographs of those. Mine clearance techniques. And then armoured fighting vehicles, and obviously the Chieftain main battle tank given a lot of time, but you also have the Scorpion and the various derivatives. The Scorpion and the various other armoured fighting vehicles in that family are talked about as well. Quite some detail. And then there is a more detailed section, there's a detailed section here on British Army helicopters. And then further details on transport, engineering vehicles and so forth, communications and electronics as titled back there. There is a colour spread in the centre here, rather nice photograph of NBC training there, the mortar. bridge laying, bridge building. A Bedford truck with a matte layer there. Engineering vehicles and so forth. Eager Beaver. So it's quite an interesting little snapshot of the equipment of the British Army at the time, and there's quite a lot of information on the individual soldier as well. Certainly a lot of photographs which show a lot of detail, which is quite good. Obviously a lot of photographs can be found online these days, but quite often books like this have photographs you won't find elsewhere. Then we have a section to the rear here. I'll just skip forward. So organisation and function, the regular and reserve armies. So there's quite a lot of information on the function of the British Army at the time as well. Details of the armoured division. And then the enemy at the rear here, which is an interesting little snapshot of what was thought of the British Army's enemies at the time. And then there's a section on the army in Northern Ireland as well. And this is very interesting. There's some quite interesting photographs in this section, which again you wouldn't necessarily find elsewhere, with a wealth of detail. And there are various notes to the text here at the rear. You have a breakdown of the regiments and corps of the British Army at the time in the appendix here, and then obviously an index at the rear if you're looking for specific terms. So that is overall quite a useful book for an appraisal of the British Army in the very late 1970s moving into the early 1980s, and it's certainly one of the better reference books, not particularly in depth, but one of the better reference books I've found for this time period. And these can be picked up very, very cheaply, which is one of the reasons I recommend it, much as it's not the thickest book in the world. There are some decent photographs in here, and these can be picked up for a few pounds online very easily from second-hand book dealers. So I highly recommend picking up a copy of this. For the price, it's very much worth having, and you certainly get some very interesting information in this. So I can highly recommend picking up a copy. So I hope you found this video informative. These can be found relatively easily, as I say, and pretty cheaply. Worth adding a copy to your collection of reference books. As I say, I found it interesting reading, and the photographs are interesting as well. So hopefully having a look at this in this video has sort of informed you if you weren't aware of this book previously, and hopefully it's been interesting flicking through it as well. As I say, if you have found this interesting and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And a big thank you as ever to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address in the description as well. That's everything for this video. So until next time, bye for now.